Last week on Tactical Tuesday was a nightmare situation. I almost shuddered to bring it back up. I know that, it caused some unease and unrest in your life. So this week, we're actually just going to talk about the same exact thing. So we have a recurring nightmare where we 3-bet pocket jacks. Guess what the turn is going to be? It's going to be an ace after you flop an overpair. Sit back, feel terrible, watch John and I squirm through today's episode of Tactical Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe and enjoy the show. So the torture continues. Looks like we still have jacks. Those that watched last week's episode and tuned in this week, they are in for a very sad surprise. And if you would like to be tortured more by breaking down 2 jacks when the turn is an ace, this is the place. This is a place for torture, pain, and suffering. So click the subscribe button and all the things. You ready to do this once again?
I miss Tactical Tuesday when I used to bring in the hands.
Yeah, it's more gruesome. More gruesome these days. So once again, we have our wolf who's playing 200 no limit. And we have a villain that opens minimum. They're playing with, looks to be like 48 big blinds. So kind of a very odd stack. They open minimum. Don't really know whether or not they're white belt, whether or not they're reg. So we'll just kind of work under the assumption that they're probably more white belty than reg because they're not a full stack. The wolf 3-bets to $20. And the villain calls. The flop is 9-4-3, rainbow. There's 41 in the pot. Wolf has villain covered. Villain has $76 behind. What do you like here, John?
I'm really glad that this villain is a white belt because I think that has a really big impact on my strategy. Also the SPR. In this spot, I would actually do something that I would never do versus a reg and check this flop with my overpair and give the white belt a chance to just overstab. I think that just using pre-flop frequencies and assumptions, I can probably be pretty confident in the fish just finding too many stabs on just every flop texture or every situation. And the reason that I think I can make that connection is that one thing that I know about fish is that they just play too many hands pre-flop. They open too many hands and they call too many 3-bets. They just, VPIP way too much or are way too happy to see a flop essentially. And I think what that does on every flop texture is that just leaves them with too many hands that they need to bluff, just like too many 0 equity hands. And I think that when I start c-betting this board texture, I given the SPR, we're just over 2. Like I stack their bluff catchers very, very easily, even starting out with like a flop check, right? So by checking this flop, I let them stab with a range that I've already determined is too wide. So it's going to show up, with, I don't know what fish, like queen 8 suited here, or just hands that regs would never have. I think fish are a little bit also prone to just thinking that my check is going to be imbalanced and unprotected and just be like, again, a little bit too trigger happy for that reason. So yeah, all of those things together just make me want to check and give the fish as much rope as possible for him to hang himself. And if he doesn't, then the SPR is so low that, we can get it in very easily on 2 streets, or we could still get it in on 1 street with 2x pot jam on the river.
Yeah, I think due to the villain being a white belt, there's so many different ways. You could bet really, really, really small. You could bet a third. You could bet quarter. You could, you can check. Probably not going to be like doing much big betting at this SPR. So yeah, a lot of options available here. Pretty advantageous spot. The wolf ends up betting half pot, which again, I think is a viable option. It's not the end of the world. The white belt is probably still going to call a lot of hands. You definitely want them to call as many hands as you can find.
Yeah. And again, like going off my pre-flop assumptions, the nice thing here is that like the white belt is going to have like king 3 suited and
sure,
jack 4 suited, just like, tons of bluff catchers. Sure. So I don't know exactly what they do. And I check, like they might just freak out and start betting for protection, which is the nice thing about checking, but they also just have way more bluff catchers here to call with than the average reg.
Sure. So start out with half. Villain calls. Turn is the ace of spades. So ace 4-3-9 with the ace 4 of spades. There's $79 in the pot. Villain has $56 remaining. So SPR is under 1. I think it's pretty obvious the turn action that hero should take.
I don't know. I'm scared now that it's obvious because I. What were you going to say? You go first.
I mean, the obvious thing for me would be to check. And I don't know that there's an argument for doing anything other than checking.
I thought that the reason for jamming the turn is that I think that one of the reads that I have versus fish is that I think they just stack off way too light, and that a fish might just put it all in here with a hand like 6-4 or 6-3, maybe something with a little bit more hope than that. Maybe a hand like 4-5.
Maybe, but if they do, then you have
like
turn checks. If they do, then if turn checks through, you can still jam river, right? Like it's not hopeless.
Yeah, that's true. You have another opportunity left on the river. I was just kind of making the argument that like I think just when I've like bluff jammed these spots, I'm always like not always, but very frequently like, oh my god, like how does he call with third pair or fourth pair or something like that? And
sure.
That's something I think about when I'm value betting or have the option to value bet.
Well, the hero does not bet; they check, and the white belt jams. I think kind of. They jam 56 into 79, and yeah, just hero needs to win about 30% of the time. Going to be hard for the white belt to have more than 70% equity here against jacks, I think. So hero just doesn't really have. I don't think hero has much of a decision here as to whether call to fold, but I think for the listener it may look a little bit dicey on the turn ace, but. Yeah, I think you just have to flick it in and go with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not even I wouldn't even call this flicking it in. I'd be like, yeah, let's put it in.
So we put it in. River's the king of spades, which is probably not great. And the villain, who's almost certainly now a white belt, ends up with ace king and wins a pot and didn't jam pre. And honestly, this whole episode of Tactical Tuesday could have just been avoided if they would have just jammed pre and never would have been able to break this one down. So sad for the wolf involved, but happy that we got to talk about the hand on Tactical Tuesday.
Yeah, glad we got a fish this time instead of a reg. That had really big impacts on my actions.
And so now, what might possibly be the last pocket jacks with a turnover card hand that we break down on Tactical Tuesday for a little while. We have a low jack open to $5. Again, we're playing 200 NL. We have Wolf in the big blind who 3-bets to $22 with black jacks. And the low jack villain calls. There is $45 in the pot. Once again, we get this 10-6-4 with 2 diamonds. Flop, there's 45 in the middle. Hero's got 178. Villain has hero covered. Villain is probably a reg in this situation, but really it's difficult to say. So John, jacks on 10-6-4, 2 diamonds. I think it's going to be the John special, huh?
Yeah, if you listened to last week's episode, you probably already know what I'm going to do here. I won't go too in-depth into it because we talked about it so much last week. But yeah, I would start out with a large c-bet here, something around the 2/3, 3/4 pot size.
And
man, the wolf, these guys ever listen?
The wolf bets a third. It's oh man, this is it's good, right? It shows us that, hey, these guys are not listening to us. What are they doing here betting a third with jacks on 10-6-4, 2 diamonds? For the Tactical Tuesday listener, just know that because we're breaking down these hands on Tactical Tuesday, the Wolves are going to get a reaming for their sizing selections here on these boards. Not exactly sure what's going on. So low jack calls because, well, we bet a third. Turn is the ace of hearts, which, you know what? They deserve it. I'm glad the turn is an ace of hearts here.
Yeah, you probably deserve the ace of diamonds on the turn, not even ace of hearts, right?
Well, I want the ace of hearts just because it creates a little bit of ambiguity as to like whether or not you can call the turn. if they bet the turn or what's going on. Like I think
Gotcha.
the ace of diamonds would make it clear they got to fold, but here I want them to suffer some. I want some pain to be inflicted on them. So hero checks, villain bets what looks to be 75% on the turn. Hero has 163.88 remaining. What do you think facing this turn bet, John?
Yeah, first just going back to the decision to check. Yeah, same thing as last week's episode. If you want to hear more about why Brad and I both are on team check on the turn, you can check out last week's Pocket Jacks episode. Here, facing this size, I mean, I'm not happy, but I'm just gonna call with jacks. I think there's a chance that they bet the turn and check back the river. So there's like one just easy way where we get to realize our equity. Yeah, the size is a little concerning. I think I would be really confident in their bet turn, check back river frequency being high if they bet like a third. If they block the turn, this size could just signal that, hey, look, I'm playing for stacks. I'm ready to play for stacks. I guess now that I say that out loud, I'm a little bit more in the fold camp. Okay. I've pivoted. I'm in team fold facing this size. I'm just worried about visibility on the river, right? Like I think we're gonna get jammed on the river by all sorts of value, all sorts of bluffs, and I'm not confident in my ability to discern like, when is Jacks a good bluff catcher on the river facing jam, and it seems like that's given the turn size, that's what's imminent. Like, do I just get bluffed by king queen and diamond hands and stuff, or do I incorrectly stack off on like a non-draw completing river on a brick river because, hey, they also have sets and ace 10 and potentially even ace king, given that this is the big blind 3-bet that can bet big on the turn and jam the river. So I would be more selective with the hands that I decide to continue on the turn facing this size, and likely just go some sort of like, I would prefer continuing with some sort of 10x, right? Like the nice thing about that is that it blocks ace 10, pocket 10s, and has 5 outs to improve to 2 pair versus their ace king, ace queen value bets relative to just the 2 outs that we have with pocket jacks. Maybe not even 2 outs. If they have a hand like ace king of diamonds, we could only have 1 out. So yeah, I'm going to fold these types of pocket pairs, and I'm going to continue with like a pair on the board, preferably an ace. Definitely all my ace X.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you pivoted, because that was, one of the reasons why I thought these two hands were especially interesting, is that, hand number 1, I think it's a slam dunk call with jacks on the turn ace when the SPR is small and when villain is a white belt. Here, the situation is really different. You didn't mention that, it's a low jack open and a low jack defend versus a big blind 3-bet, where their natural bluffs, the well is fairly dry, I think, especially when we have 2 jacks. Like we actually block king jack and queen jack, which, may be two hands like king jack of clubs, queen jack of clubs, queen jack of spades, king jack of spades, potentially, because we bet a third, so they may just call with all their overcard type hands. I don't like blocking those hands, and I also think that the low jacks defend versus 3-bet range, like this just is going to limit their availability to have a ton of hands to bluff with. And when they bet 75% on the turn, I just think like, hey, they're kind of like letting us off the hook here, and we should just fold. And I think it's like pretty, to me, I think it's a pretty clear fold, which, is going to mean inevitably that the wolf is going to call this bet and just get put in the literal blender on the river. If I had to guess, every suggestion that I think we've made so far has gone the other way, besides last hand.
I think a big lesson for this spot for the listener is that, hey, if you can see the blender coming at you on the river, you can start folding the turn with hands that just don't improve, or like are just sort of like very, very difficult to figure out where you are on the river, are extra blended on the river. So like, I think like, yeah, what Brad and I are saying here is like, we can see the blender coming because of the size of the bet here on the turn. And in order to just not get put in the blender on the river, we would just fold the turn here with this hand and continue with hands that improve more frequently or block their value, or just better candidates for whatever reason.
Yeah, you're driving down the interstate and you see a sign that says blender 2 exits away. Like, just get off on the next exit and just bypass the blender. Don't pass the blender. The
Uh,
wolf goes right in the blender. River's a 9 of hearts.
no Jack this time.
No Jack for them. Thank goodness. They don't deserve to be bailed out here. They check. Oh, look at that. The villain jams. And I don't even want to know what the wolf does at this point. I really hope they fold, but who knows? Yeah, they could take any option.
Came this far.
They do fold. They do end up making the fold on the river. Should have folded the turn. Do we have visibility? Wow, the low jack had ace king again. That's 2 pocket jacks, 2 flop over pairs, 2 ace kings. Quite consistent theme for today's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
Well, it's shocking to see ace king here, right?
Sure.
You're 100 big blinds effective. It's a low jack open and a big blind 3-bet.
Sure.
So again,
Right.
not. I don't think this is a spot where we can bash this guy pre-flop for not ripping the ace
I'm
king.
not bashing. I'm commenting on how the situations were so similar in 2 different hands. But yeah, definitely, just fold the turn and avoid the blender exit. But whatever. Maybe after listening to this episode back, the wolf will learn their lesson and avoid the blender moving forward. There's nothing like public shaming to get somebody on the straight and narrow. And if you want to tune in for more public shaming in the future, hit that subscribe button, and me and John will be your appointed shamers on a week in and week out basis.
Yeah, we have some work to do. We have some wolves to track down and kneecap in the next few days, I think.
They're about to go in a literal blender.
Yeah.
All right.
If you don't see us next week, you probably look up which jail we're in for.
Yeah. Check the news, your news feed. All right. That's all I got for this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
Good. See you next week.
See you next week. Don't miss out on our next great poker adventure. Hit that subscribe button and join the CPG family.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.